I booked the Airbnb in late October after a long stretch of night shifts at the hospital. I wanted isolation, silence, and a place where my phone signal would be weak enough to stop me from checking emails every few minutes. The listing showed a small, renovated farmhouse on the edge of a dying rural town, surrounded by open fields and a line of trees that marked the start of state land. The description was short and clean. Private stay. Owner not on property. Self-check-in. No parties. No visitors. It had dozens of positive reviews spread out over several years, most of them brief and unemotional. Clean. Quiet. Good value. That was enough for me. The drive there took almost 6 hours. The last hour was on narrow roads with no shoulder, passing abandoned barns and rusted equipment half swallowed by tall grass. Cell service faded until my phone showed nothing but the time and a low battery warning. I reached the property just before sunset. The house sat farther back from the road than I expected, connected by a long gravel driveway that curved behind a windbreak of dead trees. The fields around it were flat and empty, recently harvested, the soil dark and uneven. There were no neighboring houses in sight. The farmhouse looked older than the photos but not neglected. The white paint had yellowed, and the porch sagged slightly in the center. The lockbox was exactly where the listing said it would be. Inside, the air smelled stale, like dust and old wood. The furniture was simple and mismatched, but everything was clean. The kitchen had updated appliances that felt out of place against the worn cabinets. The living room had one couch, one chair, and a rug that had been scrubbed too many times. I noticed the layout right away. The main floor had the kitchen, living room, bathroom, and one bedroom. A narrow staircase near the back led up to the second floor. At the top of the stairs was a short hallway with 2 doors. One was open, showing an empty room with a bare mattress frame and no bedding. The other door was closed and had a keyed lock installed on the outside. That stood out. The listing had mentioned that the upstairs storage room was locked and off-limits. I assumed that was it. I unpacked, cooked a simple meal, and settled in for the night. The quiet was deep and constant. No traffic, no animals, no wind. When I turned off the lights, the darkness felt heavy, pressing in from all sides. I slept lightly but without incident. The second day passed slowly. I read, walked the edge of the field, and sat on the porch watching clouds move across the sky. I noticed tire tracks near the side of the house that hadn't been there when I arrived. They cut through the soft dirt and disappeared toward the tree line. I told myself they were old or from farm equipment, though they looked fresh. The town was miles away, but that didn't mean no one ever passed through. That night, I woke just after 2 a.m. The house was silent, but I had the clear sense that something had changed. The air felt different, thicker. I lay still, listening. After a few minutes, I heard a faint sound from upstairs. It wasn't footsteps. It was slower, more deliberate. A dragging noise, like something heavy being shifted across wood. Stopped, then started again, closer to the stairs. I stayed in bed, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was the house settling. Old buildings made noise. I had stayed in enough of them to know that. Eventually the sound stopped. I didn't sleep much after that. In the morning, I checked the upstairs hallway. Nothing looked disturbed. The locked door was still shut. The empty room was unchanged. I told myself I had imagined it. Stress did that. Isolation made small things feel large. The third day was colder. The sky stayed gray, and the fields looked flat and lifeless. I noticed more tire tracks, clearer this time, closer to the house. They hadn't been there the day before. I walked the perimeter and found footprints near the back door. The soil was soft enough to hold detail. The prints were large, uneven, and led toward the tree line. They didn't come back. I checked the listing again, scrolling through reviews, looking for anything I had missed. Buried deep was a short review from 3 years earlier. It mentioned unexpected noise at night, but said the host resolved the issue. There were no details. That evening, I double-checked the locks before going to bed. The back door latch felt loose, like it had been forced at some point and poorly repaired. I pushed a chair against it anyway. I left the bedroom light off and lay awake, listening. The noise started earlier this time. Around 1 a.m., I heard movement upstairs again. The dragging sound returned, slower, heavier. Then I heard something else. A soft thud, like something being set down. The sound moved toward the top of the stairs. I felt a vibration through the ceiling, faint but real. I stayed frozen in bed, staring at the dark doorway. My breathing felt too loud. After a long pause, I heard the creak of the first stair, then another. The steps were careful, spaced out, as if whoever was there knew the house well and was trying not to make noise. The staircase ended near the back door. I heard the latch shift. The chair scraped softly across the floor. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of damp earth. Then the door closed again. The chair was pushed back into place. The footsteps retreated. The upstairs noise didn't return. I didn't sleep at all after that. When morning came, I checked the back door. The latch was bent inward. The chair had been moved and returned, but not quite to its original position. Outside, the tire tracks were right up against the house now. I packed immediately. As I loaded my car, I noticed something else. A small camera mounted under the eaves near the back door, hidden behind a loose board. It wasn't connected to the Airbnb's Wi-Fi. It had its own power source running into the wall. I drove straight to the nearest town and called Airbnb support. I also contacted local authorities. They came out later that day. They found signs of forced entry into the locked upstairs room. Inside were sleeping bags, food wrappers, and personal items that didn't belong to me or the host listed on the account. The owner name on the listing turned out to be fake. The property had been sold years ago and sat vacant for long periods. Someone had been living there intermittently, using the Airbnb listing to ensure the house stayed occupied just enough to avoid suspicion, moving around guests instead of leaving. The person was never found. The listing was taken down. The property was boarded up. I still think about how deliberate the movements were, how careful. Whoever it was knew when I slept, knew where I was, and knew how to stay unseen. That's what stays with me. Not the noise, not the dark, but the certainty that I was never alone, and that the rules of the place were written by someone who was already inside. I booked the place because I needed distance from everything familiar. It was late winter, a gap between jobs, and my apartment had started to feel like a container for unfinished thoughts. I chose a small Airbnb on the edge of a mid-sized town, close enough to stores but far enough to feel separate. The listing showed a converted basement unit beneath a family home. Private entrance, quiet hosts, long-term stays welcome. The price was low for the area, which I justified by the lack of windows and the plain setup. I arrived in the afternoon under a dull sky. The house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, identical to the others around it. Beige siding, trimmed lawn, a single car in the driveway. The basement entrance was around the back, down a narrow concrete path bordered by a fence. The door was metal, painted white, with a keypad lock. I entered the code and stepped inside. The unit was clean in a careful way. The air smelled of detergent and something faintly sour, like water that had sat too long in pipes. The ceiling was low. Exposed beams ran across it, painted white but uneven. The furniture was basic and placed with symmetry. Bed against the far wall. Small table. Couch that folded out. A kitchenette with a hot plate and microwave. No stove. No oven. The bathroom door was thin and light. I unpacked slowly, setting my bag near the bed. I noticed then how quiet it was. Not peaceful, just insulated. Sound from outside did not reach down there. Even my footsteps felt absorbed by the carpet. The only noise came from the ceiling, a soft shifting, like someone adjusting their weight above. I told myself that was normal. People lived upstairs. Floors creak, pipes move. I showered, ate takeout, and lay on the bed scrolling through my phone. The ceiling light flickered once and steadied. I slept without dreams. The first sign that something was wrong came the next morning. I woke early, disoriented, with the sense that time had been miscounted. My phone showed that it was later than it felt. I checked my usage history and saw gaps I could not explain. Hours where the phone showed activity without memory of it. I blamed fatigue. Stress can do strange things. Over the next few days, small details stacked up. Items shifted slightly. The chair angled differently. My shoes placed side by side instead of crossed. The trash emptied when I was sure it had been half full. I considered that the host might be entering during the day, but the listing stated no access during stays. I checked the lock history in the app. It showed only my entries. At night, I heard movement above more clearly. Slow steps crossing the room directly over my bed. Pauses. Weight settling. Sometimes the sound would stop for long stretches, then resume directly overhead. I adjusted my sleep schedule to match theirs, staying up later, hoping to avoid the overlap. It did not help. One evening, I noticed a faint hum in the walls, rhythmic and steady. It reminded me of an appliance cycling on and off. I traced it to the corner near the bed, where the ceiling beam met the wall. The sound faded when I pressed my ear closer, then returned when I pulled away. It made sleep difficult. I began using headphones. The fourth night, I woke to pressure on my chest. Not weight, but the sensation of being held in place. I could move my fingers, but not my arms. My breathing stayed shallow. The ceiling above me was darker than usual, as if the light from the small lamp had been blocked. The feeling lasted long enough for panic to build, then faded. I sat up drenched in sweat, heart racing, mind grasping for explanations. Sleep paralysis fit, but the room felt altered. The air was warmer. The hum was louder. In the morning, I searched the unit more carefully. I checked vents, smoke detectors, outlets. Nothing obvious. I moved the bed slightly away from the wall. Under it, the carpet was worn flat, as if pressure had been applied there for a long time. The pattern did not match the bed frame. I contacted the host through the app, asking about noise and access. The response was polite and brief, reassuring me that no one entered the unit and that the house was old. Nothing else. The message came quickly, as if they had been waiting. I considered leaving, but part of me resisted. I told myself that fear feeds on uncertainty, that leaving would give it power. I stayed. 2 nights later, I woke to a low click near my head. The hum stopped at the same moment. I opened my eyes and saw that the room was darker again. Shadows pooled near the ceiling. I reached for my phone, but it was not on the nightstand. I found it on the table across the room, plugged in, screen dark. I had no memory of moving it. That morning, I noticed a faint indentation on the pillow beside mine, deeper than any normal shift would leave. The sheets smelled different, faintly of another detergent, sharper than mine. I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with nudity. I packed a bag with essentials and planned to leave after one more night, just to avoid making a rushed decision. I stayed awake, sitting on the couch, lights on, watching the ceiling. Around midnight, the hum returned, stronger than before. The air seemed to vibrate. Then the ceiling panel above the bed shifted slightly, no more than a fraction of an inch, then settled back. Understanding arrived slowly, like a bruise surfacing. I searched online for the address, digging past rental listings and real estate sites. Buried in a local forum thread, I found a mention of the house from years earlier. A renovation had been done without permits. A basement expansion. Complaints about noise. A comment about someone being found living between floors, using crawl spaces, accessing units through modified vents. The thread ended without resolution. I did not sleep. At first light, I left. I contacted Airbnb with a detailed report. They responded with concern and offered a refund. The listing disappeared within days. Weeks later, I followed up out of lingering unease. The property was back online under a new listing. New photos. The basement unit looked brighter, staged differently. The ceiling beams were gone, replaced by smooth drywall. The price was higher. I understood then that what I experienced was not an isolated act but a system built to reset and continue. Someone had access to the space above the ceiling, to the rhythms of guests, to their sleep. The fear came not from the idea of a hidden person, but from how easily the environment had been shaped to allow it, how quietly it could be erased and rebuilt. I still think about that hum when rooms fall silent. I no longer assume that walls are solid or that ceilings mark a boundary. I learned that privacy is often an agreement, not a fact, and that some places are designed to feel safe while offering just enough cover for someone else to remain unseen. December 2023 blurred together for me because of that apartment. I remember the cold more than anything, the way the city felt damp even indoors, the way breath lingered in the air near the windows. 4 of us rented the place for New Year's because none of us wanted to host. The listing did not show a location until after booking. It looked normal enough in photos. Neutral furniture, clean lines, nothing personal. The kind of place meant to be passed through. We arrived just after dark. The building sat on a narrow street with no signs, no name, and no buzzer directory visible from the sidewalk. The lobby smelled faintly of cleaning fluid and old concrete. The elevator worked but hesitated between floors. We joked about it then, the kind of tired humor people use after hauling bags through winter streets. The host left one key in a lockbox downstairs. One key only. That stood out because there were 4 of us, but we brushed it off. City apartments often worked that way. The unit was on a mid-level floor. When we stepped inside, the heat was already on. That detail mattered later. Someone had been there recently. The apartment itself felt stripped. No art, no books, no mail, no spare towels beyond the minimum. The fridge held a bottle of water and nothing else. The cabinets were empty except for plates and glasses stacked with precision. I remember noticing how clean the sink drain looked, as if it had been scrubbed harder than necessary. Night 1 passed quietly. We stayed up late, watched fireworks through the living room window, counted down on our phones, then slept wherever we landed. The city noise never fully stopped. Sirens passed at a distance. Somewhere below, a door slammed around 2 a.m. I woke briefly but thought nothing of it. The next morning, I went into the kitchen first. I was half asleep, focused on coffee. That was when I saw the key on the counter. It lay near the edge, metal facing up, handle turned slightly toward the sink. It was not the same key as ours. The shape differed. Ours had a black plastic head. This one was bare metal with a small dent near the top. It looked old. At first, I assumed one of my friends had found it somewhere and dropped it there. The apartment had no spare keys that we knew of, but maybe the host kept one inside. I picked it up. Felt cold. Not room temperature. Cold like it had been near a window or outside. I placed it back on the counter and made coffee. No one mentioned it when they woke. I did not ask. Seemed minor. Spare keys existed. Things got misplaced. Cities were full of small errors. That afternoon, we left to explore. When we returned after dark, the key still sat on the counter. Same position. I noticed because I had moved it slightly earlier, turning it so the teeth faced the wall. Now it faced the sink again. I told myself I misremembered. Night 2 felt different. The apartment seemed louder. Every sound carried. Pipes knocked behind the bathroom wall. The heater clicked on and off. I kept waking up, convinced I heard movement in the hallway outside the door. The peephole showed nothing when I checked. In the morning, the key was gone. The counter was clean. No outline, no mark. I searched drawers, the table, the shelf by the door. Nothing. I asked my friends if anyone moved it. No one had. We all stood there for a moment, quiet, staring at the empty space. We locked the door behind us that day with more care. We checked the windows before leaving. Everything stayed shut. When we came back late that night, the apartment felt warmer than before. The heater had been running for hours. That alone made my stomach tighten. We had turned it down before leaving. Someone had adjusted it. The key was back on the counter. This time, I noticed the moisture immediately. It did not drip, but it shined under the overhead light. The metal looked slick. A thin line of wetness had pooled beneath it, spreading into the stone surface in an uneven oval. I touched it with one finger. It was not water cold. It was warm. The smell reached me a second later. Not strong, faint, organic, like breath. I washed my hands longer than necessary. None of us said much. We wiped the counter. We placed the key inside a drawer and shut it. We checked the door lock. It worked. The deadbolt slid smoothly. The chain hung and used. The frame showed no damage, no scratches, no pry marks. That night, no one slept deeply. We kept lights on in different rooms. Phones stayed plugged in. Bags blocked the front door out of instinct, even though the lock was solid. I remember lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, counting footsteps from the apartment above. At exactly 4 a.m., the sound came. It was not loud. It was precise. The soft metal scrape of a key entering a lock. The handle did not shake. The door did not rattle. Whoever stood outside knew what they were doing. The key turned slowly, testing resistance. Pausing, turning again. The deadbolt held. The sound stopped. Then it started again, firmer this time. The pressure increased. Still no rush, no panic, just patience. My body felt heavy and light at the same time. I did not move. None of us did. We listened as the lock turned as far as it could, then stopped. After a long moment, footsteps moved away down the hallway. They did not run. They faded at a normal pace. We stayed awake until morning. No one left the apartment alone. When daylight came, the city noise returned and the fear dulled enough to function. We contacted the host through the app. The response came later, calm and brief, stating that only one key existed and no one else had access. According to them, no spare keys were unaccounted for. According to them, the apartment was secure. That explanation did not match what we experienced. We decided to leave early. While packing, I checked the drawer where we placed the spare key. It was gone. Before leaving, we spoke to the building manager in person. The office sat behind the lobby, cluttered with folders and maintenance logs. The manager looked tired, like someone who had heard too much and said little by habit. We explained the situation without drama. The extra key, the lock, the sound. The manager listened without interruption. Their expression did not change. They told us the apartment had a previous tenant who vanished months earlier. No formal notice, no forwarding address, rent unpaid, personal items removed slowly over time. The unit had been cleared by management after repeated attempts to make contact failed. The keys were never returned. The building had changed the locks once, then again after a break-in complaint from another unit. But not all copies were accounted for. In older buildings, keys spread. Former tenants made extras. Friends held onto them. People disappeared without closing doors behind them. The manager said maintenance sometimes found signs of someone entering empty units during winter. Heat turned on. Water run briefly. Nothing stolen. Just presence. We left the building with our bags in silence. Outside, the street felt brighter than before. The air burned my lungs. I kept checking behind us. Later, after returning home, I looked up local reports. A missing person case from the previous year matched the timeline. The name was not public. The details were sparse. Adult. Last seen entering their apartment building. Case inactive. I understood then what had likely happened. Someone who once lived there still had a key. Someone without a place to go. Someone who knew the building well enough to move unnoticed. They used the apartment when it was empty, when strangers came and went. They tested locks. They checked warmth. They left signs without realizing how clear they were. The wet key made sense. Held between teeth while hands worked. Body heat warming metal. No intent to scare, just habit. The slow turn of the lock was not aggression. It was caution. We were not meant to be there that night. We were temporary. We blocked access without knowing it. The apartment was not empty in the way the listing suggested. It belonged to someone who had never fully left. We reported everything to the platform. The listing disappeared weeks later. I never followed up. I still think about that key sometimes. How it appeared and vanished. How quietly someone tested a door while 4 people held their breath on the other side. How close we were to opening it, thinking it was a mistake. It was not a mistake. It was someone checking whether their place was free again. I went to that mountain town in November 2019 because my head felt loud all the time. Work had stretched into nights and weekends. My sleep was shallow. I wanted 3 days alone where nothing expected anything from me. I picked Colorado because cold air clears my thoughts. I picked a small town because it promised quiet. The listing showed an A-frame set back from the road, trees close enough to brush the roof. The price was low. The host wrote that the owner stayed off-site and that the place was private. One rule was repeated in the description and again in the confirmation message. Do not enter the locked bedroom upstairs. It held personal items. I did not question it. People store things. Locks exist for reasons. I wanted distance, not trouble. I arrived before dusk. Snow clung to the ground in patches, old and gray at the edges. The road narrowed into gravel, then dirt. The A-frame sat at the end of a short drive with no other houses in sight. The front steps creaked when I climbed them. The key was in a lockbox. Inside, the place smelled of pine cleaner and cold air. The main floor held a couch, a small table, a kitchenette, and a bathroom tucked behind a door. A ladder led up to a low loft with a locked bedroom door at the top. The door was solid and plain, painted white. A simple knob. No deadbolt. The lock looked old. I unpacked slowly. I turned on lamps instead of the overhead light. The windows faced trees and a slope that dropped away into shadow. I cooked soup and ate it standing by the sink. The quiet felt heavy but good. When night fell, the A-frame made the usual sounds of a wooden place settling. I brushed my teeth, locked the front door, and checked the windows. I slept on the couch because it felt closer to the exit. I woke the first night to a sound that pulled me out of sleep without panic. It was light and steady, wood on wood. A creak, then another. I checked my phone. 2:10 a.m. The sounds came from above along the loft floor. They moved in a line, slow like careful steps. They stopped. I waited. They started again, then stopped at the same spot, right outside the locked bedroom. The pattern repeated. No thump, no rush, just weight shifting. I lay still and listened. After a few minutes, it ended. I told myself it was old wood and temperature changes. Cold nights make houses complain. I slept again. Morning brought calm. Sun cut through the trees and lit dust in the air. I made coffee and sat at the table. The night felt thin in daylight. I took a long walk down the road. There were no footprints in the snow near the house except mine. The trees stood still. I felt foolish for losing sleep over a building. The second day passed in quiet tasks. I read, cooked. I wrote notes I did not plan to keep. The weather stayed clear but colder. At dusk, I checked the locks again without thinking about it. The loft door stayed closed. I avoided looking at it. The rule echoed in my head without reason. Do not enter. I went to bed earlier, hoping to sleep through the night. I woke again at the same time, 2:10 a.m. The sounds returned, clearer now that I expected them. The creaks traced the same path. Step, pause, step, pause. They stopped outside the locked door. I held my breath without meaning to. The house felt smaller. I told myself to stay still. The sounds ended after a few minutes. I lay awake until morning, staring at the dark ceiling. When I got up, the air felt off. Not cold. Used. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. The floor was clean, but the sink was wet. The faucet had a ring of moisture around the base. The mirror looked wiped, clear of the faint film that usually shows after a shower. One streak ran down the glass at eye level, narrow and clean, like a finger dragged straight down. My stomach tightened. I had not used the sink since before bed. I stood there and counted breaths until my hands stopped shaking. I checked the rest of the place. The front door was locked. The windows were closed. Nothing was missing. Then I noticed the floor near the stairs. Muddy boot prints marked the wood, fresh and dark. They led from the stairs toward the bathroom and back again. The pattern showed a heel and a wide sole. Adult size. They did not match my shoes. The prints stopped at the base of the ladder. None crossed the main floor. I followed them with my eyes until they ended, then looked up. The locked door sat quiet. The paint around the knob held fine scratch marks. shallow and curved. The marks faced outward. I touched them with a finger and felt the roughness. The idea formed without effort. The lock was not meant to keep someone out. It was meant to keep someone in. I backed away. I packed my bag with care, moving slowly so I could hear. I did not go upstairs. I did not open the door. I left the key on the table and stepped outside. The cold felt sharp and clean. I drove into town with my jaw tight and my hands steady on the wheel. At a gas station, I asked the clerk about the place without naming it. I mentioned an A-frame on a back road. His face changed in a way that felt practiced. He said it was owned by an older man who traveled. He said there had been trouble before, nothing criminal that stuck. Squatters, he said. Seasonal workers passing through. People who found empty places and stayed quiet. The owner would lock rooms and leave, thinking it was enough. It never was. I thanked him and left. I reported everything through the app when I had signal. I included photos of the prints and the scratches. I did not ask for a refund. I wanted distance. 2 weeks later, the listing disappeared. A month after that, I got a message from the platform saying the host had violated safety rules. No details. Months later, I searched the town records online. A police blotter mentioned an arrest near that road. A man found living in a loft, entering the main space at night to use the bathroom. He had worn boots to avoid stepping on nails in the ladder. The owner had been locking the door from the outside when he left, knowing someone stayed up there. He thought hunger and cold would drive them out. It did not. The scratches matched the report. I still think about the timing. 2:10 a.m. The careful steps. The way the sounds stopped outside that door, like a habit learned through fear. I went to the mountains to reset. I learned instead how thin privacy can be and how rules can hide harm. I sleep lighter now, but I lock doors for different reasons. We booked the place because it sat between 2 long driving days and looked quiet enough to reset. It was late summer, warm but already fading, the kind of countryside that stretches flat and empty until it suddenly doesn't. Fields folded into low tree lines, then into a cluster of old houses with peeling plaster and sagging fences. The Airbnb photos showed white walls, lace curtains, a clean bed, and a gravel drive. It was cheap, close to the road, and listed as private. The host lived nearby and mentioned daily property checks. We assumed it was a regional habit, a way of watching over things. The house stood alone at the edge of farmland. 1 floor, steep roof, narrow windows. The paint smelled fresh in patches, like someone had covered stains instead of fixing them. The air inside carried dampness mixed with strong cleaner. Felt lived around, not lived in. There were personal items nowhere, not even a forgotten shoe or framed photo. The bathroom was spotless but old. The bedroom had a heavy mattress on a wooden frame that creaked even under small shifts. The first check happened an hour after we arrived. The host walked the perimeter, looked through the windows, and stepped inside without removing shoes. He moved quickly, touching door handles, lifting the edge of a rug, glancing under the sink. He stayed less than 5 minutes. He left without warmth or rudeness, just inspection. That night passed without trouble. The countryside went quiet early. No traffic, no animals, only wind pushing grain against itself. We slept deep, worn from travel. The second day felt longer. The sky stayed gray and low. We explored nearby villages, bought food, returned before dark. The house felt colder then, even though the temperature had not dropped much. The host came again in the late afternoon. Same routine, same pace. He lingered in the bedroom doorway longer this time, eyes on the bed, then left. We cooked, ate, and lay down early. I fell asleep fast. I woke to my girlfriend screaming beside me, a sharp sound that cut the dark. She kicked away the blanket and clutched her leg. I reached for the light. Her calf had thin cuts across it, shallow but clean, several lines running close together. Blood traced down toward her ankle. The sheets were spotted fresh red. There was no glass. The floor was bare wood. No insects. No sharp edges on the bed frame. The cuts looked deliberate, precise, like something dragged across skin without pressure. We cleaned the wound and wrapped it. She shook for a long time. I searched the room. I ran my hands along the mattress seams. I checked under the bed. I looked at the window locks. Everything was intact. The door had not opened. The house stayed silent. Sleep did not come back. Morning arrived pale and thin. The host came early. He noticed the sheets right away. His focus narrowed to the bed. He accused us of damaging the mattress and demanded cash for cleaning. His tone stayed flat. No concern for injury. No curiosity. Only blame. I pulled the mattress from the frame. The underside was dark with old stains. Brown and yellow layers soaked deep into the foam, spread wide and uneven, not from spills but from repeated soaking. The smell rose as soon as air hit it, metallic and sweet, old and sealed in. It was not recent. It was not from us. The pattern looked like bodies lying there again and again, bleeding slowly, never enough to ruin the surface, always enough to sink in over time. The host stiffened. He insisted again on payment. I refused. We packed fast. I loaded the car while my girlfriend sat inside, pale and quiet. Before leaving, I walked to the neighboring property, a small house set back behind a fence of wire and wood. The neighbor watched from the doorway. I explained without details, just enough to ask if the place had problems. He nodded once and looked toward the Airbnb. He made a small motion with his hand that meant enough had been said. He had seen people arrive and leave fast. He knew the owner rented only short stays, long enough to pay, short enough to vanish. People never stayed long enough to complain. We drove away without looking back. At the next town, we went to a clinic. The nurse examined the cuts. She said they were made by a sharp object dragged lightly, not accidental, not from fabric or insects. The wounds healed in days, leaving faint marks. Weeks later, after we were home, I reported everything to the platform. I sent photos of the mattress. The listing disappeared. Months after that, curiosity pushed me to search again. The house appeared under a new name, new photos, the same bed covered with a thick mattress protector. What stayed with me was not fear but clarity. Someone had learned how to hurt without noise, how to accuse instead of explain, how to keep damage hidden under clean surfaces. The daily checks were not care. They were control. The stains were not accidents. They were records. We left early enough to keep our story. Others did not. I booked the place for one night because it sat near the highway and cost less than a tank of fuel. I was driving alone, cutting across a rural stretch I had never seen before, and I wanted a quiet stop that did not require interaction. I used only my initials on the reservation, something I had started doing after a previous bad experience. The platform allowed it. The host profile looked clean. Good reviews, fast replies, no red flags. The house sat at the edge of a small village where the road narrowed and the lights thinned out. It was a single-story structure with a steep roof and a long gravel drive. Fields pressed close on three sides. The fourth side faced the road, though calling it a road felt generous. It was more a strip of worn asphalt with grass breaking through at the edges. There were no nearby houses close enough to see clearly. The place smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. Everything inside was neat in a way that felt practiced, not lived in. The host had installed a keypad lock. No meeting, no keys. I appreciated that. I entered the code, closed the door, and locked it behind me. I checked the windows out of habit. They were old but solid. The bedroom window faced the back field. Nothing but open land and a line of trees far off. I cooked a simple meal, ate standing up, and scrolled through my phone. The signal was weak. Messages lagged. I plugged my phone in and set it on the nightstand. I lay down early. The mattress was firm and quiet. The house settled around me with small sounds that meant nothing. Pipes cooling, wood adjusting, wind passing over the roof. I fell asleep without effort. The knock pulled me out of sleep in a clean, sudden way. 3 taps, evenly spaced. Not loud, not hesitant. I checked the time on my phone without unlocking it. 11:47 p.m. The house went completely still, like it was holding its breath with me. I did not move. I did not speak. I lay there listening. The knock came again, same rhythm, same pressure. Then a voice followed, calm, controlled, close enough to the door that it carried clearly through the thin wood. Said my full name, not initials, not a shortened version. My full legal name pronounced correctly, with the same cadence I was used to hearing from banks or hospitals. The way people say it when they are reading it off a form. My body went cold in stages. First my hands, then my feet. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of speed up, which scared me more than panic would have. I ran through every place that name existed. Government records, work documents, old accounts. I had not used it for the booking. I had not sent it in any message. I had not shared travel plans with anyone who could connect me to that location in real time. I stayed silent. The person outside did not knock again. Instead, footsteps moved across the porch. They were slow and uneven, with a slight drag on one side, like a heel that did not lift fully. The steps reached the corner of the house, then continued along the wall. Gravel shifted, dry weeds cracked. The sound faded, then returned, completing a full circle around the building. Then it did it again, the same path, the same pace, measured and patient. I kept my eyes open and fixed on the dark ceiling. I did not reach for my phone. I did not turn on a light. I focused on breathing through my nose and keeping my chest still. After the second pass, the footsteps stopped somewhere near the back of the house. I waited for another knock. None came. I waited for the sound of a car. Nothing. I waited until the silence felt heavy enough to press on my ears. Sleep did not come back. Morning arrived slowly, a gray light filtering through thin curtains. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak, like I had run a long distance without noticing. I checked the door first. The lock showed no sign of tampering. I checked the windows next. The bedroom window stopped me. On the outside of the glass were handprints, faint but clear, smeared slightly as if weight had been applied and then shifted. They were positioned high, near the top edge of the window frame. Too high for someone standing on the ground. Too high even if they had stood on the narrow concrete lip below. The marks suggested someone had reached up and leaned in, palms flat, fingers spread. The spacing of the prints bothered me. They were wider than mine, the fingers longer, the reach unnatural without assistance. There were no footprints in the field. The ground was dry and hard. Whatever had been used to reach the window had not left an obvious trace. I took photos. I packed my things with care, checking each corner of the room before moving on. When I left, I locked the door and stood in the driveway longer than needed, scanning the tree line and the road. Nothing moved. A few hours later, after I had driven far enough to feel less exposed, a message came through from the host. It referenced my sleep and suggested I had been nervous. The timing told me it had been written earlier and sent when the signal allowed. The tone felt informed, not curious. I did not respond. Instead, I contacted the platform and reported the incident with photos. I asked for an explanation of how my full name could have been known. The initial response was polite and slow. The explanation came days later, pieced together through follow-ups and my own digging. The host used a third-party smart lock service linked to identity verification software. While I had booked under initials, my account had been verified years earlier with full identification. The lock service had access to that data. The host had administrative access to the lock logs and associated profiles. It was legal under the terms I had agreed to without reading closely enough. As for the height of the handprints, a local review I later found mentioned a ladder stored behind the shed. Another guest had complained about late-night checks disguised as maintenance. The dragging step matched an injury the host had referenced in an old comment thread, framed as a reason for slow responses. Everything fit together in a way that removed mystery but not unease. There was no intruder. There was no unknown presence. There was only someone with access, curiosity, and the confidence that came from knowing how little accountability existed in that space between privacy and property. The listing stayed up for a while after my report. Then it vanished. I stopped using my full name anywhere I could avoid it. I stopped trusting quiet places by the road. I learned how easily information travels when given the chance, and how calm a threat can sound when it knows exactly who you are. I booked the place because I had no energy to think. The funeral had been scheduled with little notice, and flights were limited. Hotels near the service were full or priced high because of a local event. The Airbnb showed up late in the search results. A small apartment in a quiet residential block. Clean photos, neutral furniture, no personality. That worked for me. I needed a place to sleep, shower, and sit without being asked anything. I arrived in the early evening. The building was older but maintained, the kind of place with narrow hallways and doors that closed softly because the hinges had been worn smooth over decades. The unit smelled faintly of laundry soap and stale air. The furniture looked new in a way that suggested replacement, not care. Couch cushions firm, table without marks, walls bare. Nothing felt wrong at first. That almost mattered more than anything else. I dropped my bag, washed my hands, and sat on the couch. I called a family member to confirm the next day's timing. Kept my voice low. I was tired, emotionally flat, saying things without much thought. The call ended. I sat there longer than needed, staring at the wall across from me, listening to the building settle. I noticed the light later, when I went into the bedroom. It blinked blue, faint but steady, coming from the smoke detector mounted above the bed. One soft pulse every few seconds. Caught the eye without demanding attention. I stood there looking up at it, trying to remember if modern detectors did that. Some do, some do not. The placement bothered me more than the light. It sat directly over where a pillow would be. I lay down without turning off the light. The blinking continued. Each pulse reflected faintly off the white ceiling, barely noticeable but impossible to ignore once seen. I sat back up and pulled a chair under it. I stood on the chair and looked closer. The unit looked newer than the rest of the fixtures. The plastic was clean, no dust in the vents. I unplugged it. The room went still in a way that felt different from before. Not quieter, just less watched. I sat back on the bed and exhaled. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. The host had sent a message through the app asking why I had disconnected safety equipment. The timing was exact. Too exact. There had been no delay, no check, just awareness. My stomach tightened, slow and heavy. I did not respond. I stood up and walked back into the living room. I picked up my phone and called the same family member again. I spoke quietly, seated on the couch, facing away from the bedroom. I said specific things about the funeral, about who would attend, about how I felt about being there. Things I had not typed anywhere. Things I had not shared in messages. Before the call ended, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the host. It referenced the call I was on. Not vaguely, precisely. It repeated my words back to me, the same phrasing, the same order. It framed them as concern, as context, as if the host had been part of the conversation all along. I ended the call. I stood up. The apartment felt smaller, like the walls had shifted inward by a few inches. I walked through each room without touching anything. I did not look up at the detector again. I grabbed my bag, left everything else behind, and walked out. I sat in my car with the doors locked and hands shaking on the steering wheel. The building looked normal from the outside. Lights in other windows. A person walking a dog across the street. Nothing about it suggested danger. That made it worse. I drove to a gas station and sat there under bright lights. I contacted the platform and reported what had happened. I sent screenshots of the messages and photos of the detector. The response came faster than I expected. They told me to leave the property, which I had already done. They issued a refund without argument. They advised me not to return. I stayed the night in my car and drove home early the next morning, skipping the funeral. I told my family I was sick. That part was not entirely untrue. In the days after, I tried to explain it to myself in practical terms. Hidden cameras disguised as detectors are not new. Audio monitoring is easy. Remote access is cheap. What unsettled me was the confidence. the lack of fear of being caught. The immediate response suggested constant monitoring. Not something checked later, something watched live. 2 weeks passed. Life filled back in around the edges. The shock dulled. I stopped checking the app. Then an automated email arrived asking me to review a recent stay. The property name was different. The host name was different. The photos were new, staged from slightly different angles, with new bedding and a different couch. The address was the same. I clicked through out of disbelief. The layout matched exactly. The same narrow hallway, the same window orientation, the same bedroom proportions. The smoke detector was still there in the photos, mounted above the bed, its light not visible in the staged brightness. The host profile showed no history. New account. Verified. The listing description emphasized safety and comfort. The reviews were empty. I forwarded the email to the platform along with a follow-up report. This time the response was slower. They acknowledged receipt. They said they would investigate. I never received confirmation of removal. The listing stayed active for weeks after, then vanished again. I understand now how it works. Accounts get burned and replaced. Properties rotate names. Photos change. Reports get buried under volume. Short stays reduce risk. People leave quickly and move on. Some never notice. Some notice and do not want to believe it. The system relies on that hesitation. What stays with me is not the device itself, but the moment my private words came back to me from someone who should not have heard them. The feeling of being reduced to data in a place meant for rest. The way a normal room can turn hostile without changing shape. I no longer book places where the host is invisible. I check ceilings before beds. I listen for clicks and hums that do not belong. I assume that privacy is temporary unless proven otherwise. That night taught me that being alone does not mean being unobserved, and that trust, once broken quietly, does not announce itself when it leaves. We went in October 2020 because everything else was closed or priced high, and we wanted one last fishing trip before winter sealed the lakes. There were 3 of us splitting gas and food, cutting costs wherever we could. The cabin listing sat buried under dozens of nicer places, but it was cheap and close enough to the water. Promised isolation, no service, no Wi-Fi, and framed that as a feature. It used words about immersion and real wilderness. We believed it because we wanted to. The drive north thinned out fast. Paved roads turned to gravel, then to dirt scored by truck tires. The trees tightened in around us, taller and darker than anything near towns. We passed the last gas station hours before arrival. After that, there were no signs, no mailboxes, no lights. The GPS stopped updating long before we reached the turnoff. But the directions were simple. Follow the logging road. Take the fork marked by a bent metal post. Keep going until the road ends. The cabin sat near a small lake, set back among spruce and birch. It looked like it had been dropped there and forgotten. One room, a narrow porch, a tin roof that dipped in the middle. There was an outhouse down the slope and a fire pit ringed with stones that had been moved many times. The place smelled of cold wood and old smoke. Everything inside was bare but clean enough. Bunk beds, a table, a propane stove, shelves with mismatched dishes. No radio, no generator, no hint of recent use beyond a swept floor. The first thing we noticed after unloading was the silence. Not quiet, but empty. No flies, no mosquitoes, no birds calling from the trees. Even the lake sat flat and dull, without ripples. We stood there for a while without speaking, listening for something to fill the space. Nothing did. Felt like the air itself was holding back. We shrugged it off as weather. October can do that. Cold snaps come early. Things go still. We focused on setting up, starting a small fire, getting rods ready. The light faded fast, the way it does that far north. Darkness arrived all at once, thick and close. We ate by lantern glow and laughed about how much money we were saving. That night, after the fire burned down and we crawled into the bunks, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside. They were heavy, slow, and deliberate. Each step pressed into the ground and lifted with effort. There was a pause between them, consistent and measured. Not the erratic pattern of an animal. Not a circle either. The steps moved along one side of the cabin, stopped, then continued around the corner. Felt like someone checking the walls. I held my breath and listened. One of my friends shifted above me, awake. The steps reached the porch. The boards creaked once under weight, then again. No attempt at the door. Just standing there, close enough that I could sense it through the wall. After a long moment, the steps moved on, slow again, tracing the edge of the building before fading into the trees. None of us slept after that. We stayed still until gray light crept through the window. When we finally went outside, the silence was still there, unchanged. The fire pit held no new ash. The ground around the cabin was soft from recent rain, perfect for marks. The prints started near the porch. They were long and uneven, shaped like bare feet but stretched. The toes splayed wider than normal. The heel impressions were deep, the midfoot shallow, like the weight carried forward. Each print pointed slightly outward, suggesting a wide stance. The stride was long, longer than any of us could manage without running. There were no boot edges, no tread patterns, no signs of shoes at all. We followed the line until it vanished into harder ground. There were no vehicle tracks nearby, no signs of a camp, no wrappers or cans, just those prints, leading away with purpose. We took photos and sent them when we found a thin patch of signal near a ridge. The host replied later with amusement, brushing it off as locals. The tone suggested we were overreacting. That answer made no sense. We had driven for hours without seeing a single occupied structure. There were no communities, no seasonal camps, nothing within a distance that made casual wandering plausible. We debated leaving. Pride and money kept us there longer than they should have. We told ourselves it was a prank or a hunter passing through. We spent the day fishing close to shore and stayed alert. The lake gave us nothing. No bites, no movement beneath the surface. The woods stayed still. That night, the steps came back. Earlier this time, they approached from the trees and stopped just short of the porch. The weight shifted. The boards creaked once. The pacing began again, slower than before, closer. It did not test the door. It did not touch the windows. It stayed just outside, making sure we were there. I realized then that the silence was not absence. It was avoidance. Animals knew something we did not. Morning brought more prints, overlapping the old ones closer to the walls. We packed without discussion. The decision felt shared without words. As we loaded the car, I noticed something near the tree line. A ladder made from stripped branches leaned against a trunk, hidden from the cabin by angle and brush. The rungs were worn smooth in places. On the drive out, we stopped at a ranger station hours south. We showed the photos. The response was calm and practiced. The area had a history of squatters using abandoned hunting cabins during off-seasons. Some lived off-grid for years, moving between structures, avoiding roads, avoiding people. A few walked barefoot or used minimal footwear to leave less trace. Some suffered injuries that changed their gait. They watched cabins to see which were occupied and for how long. They preferred short stays. They avoided confrontation. They checked. The host likely knew. Locals in that region shared information quietly. Renting the cabin kept it from being claimed permanently while still bringing in money. Complaints faded once guests left. Cell service gaps did the rest. We drove the rest of the way in silence. The fear settled into something heavier, something like understanding. Nothing followed us. Nothing needed to. We had been measured and found temporary. That knowledge stayed with me longer than the trip, longer than the season. I have not gone back that far north since. We booked the place for a job interview weekend because hotels near the office were full. It was late winter, the kind where snow looked clean until it trapped you. The listing showed a simple house on the edge of a small town. Neutral walls, basic furniture. It advertised quiet, privacy, and a finished basement for storage only. The host mentioned winter storms were common and said the power lines could be unreliable. That felt normal. We arrived Friday afternoon. Snow had already started falling, slow and thick. The driveway had been cleared recently. The porch light was on before we reached the door. Inside, the heat worked and the house smelled faintly of laundry soap. Everything looked prepared, almost staged. Shoes lined neatly by the door. Towels folded with sharp edges. No personal photos anywhere, not even generic ones. The living room windows faced the woods. Trees pressed close, bare branches touching glass when the wind picked up. I remember noticing how quiet it felt even with the storm starting. Snow absorbs sound. It makes spaces feel sealed. The interview was scheduled for Saturday morning. We unpacked light, planning to leave Sunday afternoon. The first evening passed without issue. We cooked, reviewed notes, and went to bed early. Sometime after midnight, the wind intensified. Snow hit the house harder. The power cut out without warning. No flicker, just silence. The heater shut down. The refrigerator stopped humming. The dark felt immediate. We checked phones. No service. The storm had thickened. We used flashlights and candles found in a kitchen drawer, placed carefully like they had been counted. We contacted the host through the app once the signal briefly returned. The response came later than expected. They instructed us to reset the breaker in the basement and said outages happened during heavy snow. They added that the breaker box was near the stairs. The basement door sat off the kitchen. It was a solid door, heavier than the others, painted white. The handle felt colder than the rest of the house when I touched it. I opened it slowly. Stairs descended into darkness. The air smelled different immediately. Damp concrete and something older, like metal left wet too long. I turned on my flashlight and started down. The stairs creaked. The beam hit the bottom wall first, revealing bare concrete and a small landing. That was when I saw the second staircase. It dropped further down, narrower, unfinished. No railing. The angle was steeper. The light did not reach the bottom. I paused. This had not been in the listing photos. The breaker box was not visible from where I stood. I moved forward. The concrete floor was clean. No dust. No debris. Footprints marked the surface faintly, pressed into moisture that had not dried. I followed the wall, expecting to find the panel. Instead, my light swept across a mattress on the floor. It was not old. The fabric looked new. The edges were not frayed. A thin blanket lay folded at the foot. Not tossed, placed. Metal glinted behind it. Chains ran from the beams above down to eye level, bolted deep into the wood. They hung with slight slack, heavy and oiled. No rust. The bolts were tight and bright. There was no dust on any of it. The concrete beneath the mattress was darker, compressed, as if weight had been there recently. The air felt warmer down there than upstairs. I did not go further. I backed up without turning around, keeping the light fixed ahead of me. When I reached the stairs, my hand shook enough that the beam wobbled. Upstairs, the house felt wrong. The quiet pressed harder. We checked every room again. All doors were locked, windows closed. Snow had piled against the glass, sealing us in. We found the welcome binder on the kitchen table. It had not been there earlier. It was thick with plastic sleeves. The cover showed the house exterior printed in color. Inside were house rules that did not match the listing. The language was formal, almost legal. Rules about staying indoors during storms. Rules about not using certain doors. One rule stood out. It stated that if crying was heard, it should not be investigated. It gave no explanation. It did not frame it as a joke. It sat between rules about water usage and trash disposal. The breaker box location was listed further down, described as being behind a locked panel in the lower basement. That confirmed the space I had seen was intentional. The power stayed out. The temperature dropped steadily. Snow continued through the night. We did not sleep. We sat together in the living room, coats on, listening to the wind push against the house. Sometime before dawn, a sound carried through the floor. It was faint at first, a low noise, uneven, rising and falling. It did not echo like pipes. It had rhythm. I recognized it before I wanted to. Crying travels differently through a structure. It vibrates, catches on corners, came from below. The sound lasted several minutes. It stopped. Then it returned, quieter, like someone trying to stay silent. We did not move. The rule in the binder repeated in my mind, not as a warning but as an instruction shaped by experience. When the sound ended, footsteps followed. They moved onward above the basement, not below. Slow steps crossing under the living room. The front door did not open. No exterior sounds followed. The steps stopped near the kitchen. We stayed still until daylight crept through the windows. The storm eased enough for phone signals to return. We contacted emergency services. We left details, address, and what we found. By the time help arrived, the house was silent. The power had returned. The basement door stood open. The lower space was empty. The mattress was gone. The chains remained. Fresh marks marred the concrete where something heavy had been dragged. Later, we learned the house had been under investigation before. The host did not live there. The property was owned through a shell company. The basement had been modified without permits. Complaints from neighbors about noise had been logged and dismissed due to weather explanations. The crying was not supernatural. It was human. Someone had been held there during storms when travel was impossible and sound would not carry. The rule existed because curiosity had consequences. The job interview never happened. The company shut down the hiring process after the incident. The listing was removed. The house was seized. I still think about how close we came to following instructions without question. How easily the storm isolated us. How prepared the space was. Snow covers tracks. Darkness hides details. Rules teach silence. That basement was not abandoned. It was active.